Good morning, good afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness of the lived reality of trauma, removal trauma, adoption, foster care and so forth, but also to bring what I've learned over many years, not only just from my own personal experiences, but my many years as a practitioner and an advocate in these areas. Now, yes, this is the next video in the adoption series. And I'm still moving through in the area of the last few videos of why adoptions fail and some of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on that develops all these layers of misinterpretation and misunderstandings that literally destroy the potentiality of many adoptions unnecessarily and create a lot of hardship in a lot of people's lives. Now, I am an adoptee and I'm doing it from an adoptee's perspective. But I've also spent many years as an advocate in this area trying to bridge the gaps between biological family, adopted families and adoptees, and understanding foster care, those that have gone through multiple placements in foster care and so forth, to try to create a middle ground. And that is the base I want you guys to understand that I'm making these videos from. I'm not choosing any one side. I'm trying to make the best of a very complicated, unnecessary evil in my book. I don't see adoption as a positive thing because it's not understood and valued the way it should be by the participants in it and the society that promotes it. But I digress. In this video, I want to explain another step in the components of the fog that I believe is one of the foundational basis of why so many adoptions fail. Now, every child, when they're removed, we go into a threat state, we go into a survival state. Depending upon how protracted this survival state is how much of our physiology is defined by it. For some, the adoption placements are fairly quick, which adds an intensity, but there's not a lot of examples in the body to reinforce that long-term shutdown, unless the adoption is a negative one. The placement is not engaging in the right way, then it will ultimately reinforce and achieve the same end. But what I'm talking about is, we know with threat responses, we have fight, flight, freeze. Well, as an infant or a child in removal, we cannot stop what is happening to us. So we move quite quickly into a freeze state. Because that freeze state is protracted, we move into what is called dorsal vagal shutdown. We shut down. And what a lot of people don't realize, when infants are removed at birth for adoption, the placement doesn't happen straight away. It can happen months, even a year later. Some are placed in a temporary foster care for 8, 9, 10 months, a year or 2 years before placement, because there may be legal battles, there may be other processes going on in the background. And there is this belief that when a child is slated for adoption, none of the people looking after that child can physically engage with that child, because you've got to leave that child open to attach to their long-term placement, to their adopted family. That feeds an embedded dorsal vagal shutdown state in critical developmental years. And not a lot is really understood of what happens with that. A lot of the experts, there are a lot of videos about dorsal vagal shutdown out there, but they all talk about moving into it and moving out of it. But what if you move into it and don't move out of it in your developmental years? And that is the basis that I want to bring into this video. Because I've not come across an adoption where, when the child is actually trying to connect, there's a little misunderstanding that sabotages that connection to the adoptive parents. And that is, when we come out of a dorsal vagal shutdown, when we come out of a shutdown state, we need to move through fight or flight. That is a part of the process of our threat responses. We are designed that way. Words cannot stop this from happening. Words cannot express what this is. This is a physical feeling and sensation of aggression and adrenaline and fear and all these things. Every emotion that they went through in the process of shutting down goes back through in the coming out. We move through fight or flight, the only responses we have. So when the infant or the child tries to start to connect to those raising them, and they begin going through that, I'm feeling a little bit safe, I'm coming out of my shutdown, and I start to move into that aggression and fear and anxiety and all of that. The adopted parents perceive that as acting up, misbehaving, tantrums, rejection, and all these other components. They're difficult, they're challenging, that's not my kid. It brings a stress to the developing connections within that adopted or long-term placement family that remain. It pretty much ends the majority of opportunities of actually connecting within a non-biological family. And that's the understanding that I want to get across in this particular video. As I said, when we move into a shutdown state, we move through fight or flight into freeze. Freeze, when we cannot escape, we move into a dorsal vagal shutdown, we accept our fate. We become numb. The path out of it, we have to go through all those steps again. The other component is if we remain in a dorsal vagal shutdown state for protracted periods of time, our physiology becomes developed to be in that place, which adds another layer of difficulty in coming out of that. And we need to work with that in developing the ways and the understandings within adopted families and within long-term foster care to create the physical environments we need to come out of that. Hence the problem. And it is a huge problem. I say all the time, quite often I get adoptive families, parents, reaching out and asking, why did my child suddenly become aggressive? One moment they weren't, next minute they were just starting to explore feeling safe, that I can be me, that I can bring those parts of me that I've repressed naturally forward. And it happens at different ages. Usually the developmental milestones are the ages where it happens. And if it's worked in the beginning, if it's worked when they were little, then the outburst through aggression and through fear and anxiety is short-lived, abrupt, and not that destructive. But if that is repressed until teen years, then that adds a whole another layer of complexity. Because then the behavior of aggression can be destructive. The behavior of anxiety, fear can be destructive. And this is where prior preparation allows for a better outcome, where possible. One of the hopes of me making these videos is the information goes out and people who are contemplating adoption learn before these mistakes are made. But once these mistakes have been made, a lot of it just has to play out. But at least understanding the why helps navigate the playing out, and then with the hope that it is less destructive. So understand the fundamentals of coming out of a shutdown state to build connection. We have to move through all the fear and emotions and the fight, aggression, adrenaline, everything that put us into that state prior to it. We also, when we move into an adoption scenario or a long-term placement of foster scenario, the biological being person that we are is repressed. We create the avatar to be part of, to try to connect to this family. Because as I was explained in other videos, the physical reflections and reassurances are not there. We're biologically different. So when that biological person, when we start to feel safe in a non-biological family situation, that biological person starts to want to come out. And that triggers us to connect. That triggers us to find and define safe. That triggers us to come out of that dorsal vagal shutdown and move into the aggression, the anxiety, the fear, the adrenaline, and so forth and so forth. I hope you guys can really get that. Because if we can find and develop ways to work with that, we can move forward into genuine connections. This is why, as I said in the last video, it is so critical in the world of adoption that the adoptive parents You recognize you're raising somebody else's child with a history. You shape the place that they are in your family by learning them and who they are. And that will allow this process to naturally flow through. Yeah, it is challenging. Yeah, there will be plenty of times of difficulty, but you start to develop the abilities of connection to be able to process through. You're able to connect with your adopted children to co-regulate, help them co-regulate back into a sense of being balanced and part of. Because you're shaping the place they are in your family to match them and their personality and their dynamics. But if you try to shape them and control them, if you use your words to shut down those expressions, when we start to move out of a dorsal vagal shutdown, when we go through the adrenaline, the fear, and the terror, and everything associated with our removal, you will become the enemy. You will become the physical example of everything that happened to us. Because you're the one that's physically present and physically there. You will become the opposition. And then we will not feel safe in the environment you provide. And that is why the wedge widens and adoptions fail. When we try to connect, we got to move through those emotions. If they are not acknowledged, you will reflect the harm that was done to us through removal. That is, I cannot emphasize that enough in that understanding. And it's something that words cannot resolve. Only physical actions, only things that support safe and connection can resolve it. And it is a mistake that I've seen play out so many times. And I don't blame adoptive parents or long-term foster carers for that, because you guys are never told. The system never advises you on how to raise somebody else's kid, because they feel that it will create an obstacle for finding people willing to take on somebody else's kid. Hence me making these videos, hence trying to get this understanding out there in the hope that it's received. I really hope this makes sense, and I really hope it is valued. And I love you guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, and I'll see you all next time.